Hello everyone, back at it again. I had to drive a little bit north to find good ice, and eventually I did find some. The only problem was that it was covered with 2 inches of slush. Now, if you don't have the right boots, 2 inches of slush is just miserable. You know, any kind of leather boot or boots with stitching, anything like that, any kind of seam, the water, and it's freezing cold water, is going to seep into your boots in about 15 minutes. The boots I have are rubber baffin boots. I'm sure there's some other good rubber boots that are warm and can keep you warm and dry in slush. You can see me splashing around there. I just checked the ice. There's about 6 inches of ice with 2 inches of slush on top. We did have some freezing rain earlier this week. We did have some snow, and we did have some mild temperatures. So I don't know if this is just accumulated from the snow and freezing rain and sleet, or it's actually bubbling up from old holes in the ice, or maybe runoff. It looks pretty clean. The water here is clear, but I'm gonna drill a bunch of holes and see if I can land on some fish. And what I'm fishing here is basically a weed flat, but it's not uniform. There's areas with mud and areas with green weeds, areas with dead and dying weeds, and everything in between. There's, you know, kind of like weed fragments on the bottom sometimes, or like you see different kinds of weeds and they don't do as well in the cold, and they're all kind of folded over and laying flat on the bottom. And so the trick for this pond is to land on some green weeds that are still standing up. And most of those tend to be in deeper water. And we don't have a lot of deep water here. I think the maximum depth is maybe 10 feet. So right now I'm just going in a line, and then I'm going to come back offset about 20 yards and then drill another line, you know, kind of in the middle of where I drilled before. Yeah, my drill still has that kickback at the end, especially when I get to the bottom of the hole. I mentioned it in a previous video, but the new version is supposed to have a safety feature that prevents that kick out at the end. And if you're not expecting it, it can really torque your wrist and ligaments. It's a really powerful drill. Cuts through 6 inches of ice like nothing. And I drilled bunch of holes looking for the right weeds, and I still had, I think, 3 bars left on the battery, and I've used that same battery all season so far, and I haven't charged it. So you know, especially for early ice, I think a drill auger combo is the way to go. So I'm going to drill my holes, and I'm going to get set up for fishing. And I'm going to check each and every hole with the underwater camera. I'll tell you, it took me a while to find them. And really it was finding the right combination of weeds and depth. So I spent probably the first hour or two without seeing very much at all. And then I hooked a yellow perch, and I saw another one on camera. And that let me know I was close. And it's almost like you run into veins of fish, like gold mining, or I don't know, prospecting for oil or something. And once I start landing on fish or being able to call fish in, I know I'm close, and I just need to you know, keep going in that direction, or drill out a few more holes in that general area where I found some fish. It can be kind of discouraging, you know, if you go for an hour or two and you just don't see anything. But I fished here before, and I know there's fish in here. It's a fairly small pond. They have to be here somewhere. They don't just disappear. So I was pretty confident if I just kept going that I would find them. And I think what I'm going to cut to is the first fish I found, and then we'll go underwater and watch the underwater action. Alright, here we go. This is the very first fish I caught, and you can tell how shallow I was fishing by how quickly that fish came up out of the hole. I really didn't even have to reel. I just pulled up, and he's on the ice. Now I got a problem. There's 2 inches of slush on the ice. I don't want to put my camera down in the water, and I just have to get things organized a little bit because I don't have enough hands to deal with the fish and the camera and the rod all at the same time, and the chest camera too. And he's okay. He's made himself a little pool in the slush. He's got plenty of water, and I will get him back in the water pretty soon. He doesn't have very dark bars. Alright, here we go. We're going underwater. Now, a lot of what I was seeing was this. It looks kind of like the surface of the moon. And there's a few weed fragments, but this isn't really what I'm looking for. There's nothing really here to hold the fish. It just looks kind of barren. Now, some of the holes had a lot of aquatic insects, and you could see them scooting around, but there just didn't seem to be any fish with them. So I was moving around, trying to find active fish, trying to find something to hold the fish in one specific area, and that something ended up being green weeds. So I'm going to cut to that next. Okay, this is what I was looking for. We've got standing weeds. They're mostly green. Some of them are a little yellow. You can see a lot of aquatic insects on the screen, kind of scooting around. I just put the camera down, so it's kind of swaying back and forth a little bit. And I will get a lure down there pretty quickly. But this is what I was looking for. It's almost like, a home for the fish. That is a leech flutter spoon. And I'm fishing it fairly high above the weeds, and right away I got a little bass coming in to check it out. He's tasting it, but he didn't really eat it, and then he scooted away. I think some of the time this leech flutter spoon was just maybe a little too big for the fish, or a little bit too bright. But I'm going to stay with the weeds here. I got 2 perch coming in. They came in fast. There's a 3rd one down below. And there's a 4th and 5th one over on the side. See them sliding in? So it was a whole school of perch that came in. And they went down low. And I think it's because that bass came in. I ended up catching the bass. But the perch bolted once that bass came in. It's funny. Sometimes before the camera, I'd be fishing and catching perch. I'd be on a school of perch, and all of a sudden they disappear. And I never really knew why. Well, a lot of times it's because a bass is on the side or a pickerel. And once the perch see a pickerel or bass come in, they get real low to the weeds, and they leave a lot of times. So having the camera down there just helps confirm some of the stuff that I noticed before with a fish finder. But you get such a better view with the camera. You can see exactly what's going on. You can see, okay, those are green weeds. There's a little bit of yellow in them, but mostly green. It's not just in a regular bottom. It's not a high spot. Sometimes with a fish finder you think, oh, those weeds that are really thick are the bottom. No, it's not the bottom. Those are definitely weeds. But the camera just helps, take any of the guesswork out of it. There's another bass. I ended up catching him too. You can see the camera bouncing around as I pulled him up through the hole. But yeah, it's such a clear view of what's going on underneath the surface, and you can't get the same view. I mean, maybe you could if you put your face down in the hole and put a hood up over your head, but you can't fish like that. It's too hard to fish like that. So yeah, I really like the underwater camera, and it shows you exactly what's going on down there. All right, I let that little bass go. He saw him shoot by the camera. Now I'm trying to get some more fish interested. And that's a better bass. I almost had him. That one was, I don't know, probably around 2 pounds or so. And he bit it. The rod I was fishing was a medium light, and for that fish, I would have been better off with a medium rod to help set that hook. I almost had him. I did try to stick him, but my rod just kind of folded up and really didn't drive that hook home. But that's okay. There'll be more fish coming through. You can see just the outline of a perch on the outer edge there. The perch were a little, I don't know, fussy today. And it might have been because there were bass in the area. You see there's a bass coming in and a perch behind him. And the perch is kind of deferring to the bass. Something that bass didn't like. I wasn't really jerking it too hard, but something I did he didn't like. Something didn't look natural. I also tried some soft plastics. Those didn't work. I think because of the clear water and just the overall fussiness of the fish, I would have been better off with the black ice Swedish pimple that I used in the last video, but I know that there's some bigger fish in this pond, and I was really hoping to draw them in with a bigger spoon, a bolder spoon. The Leech flutter spoon has a nice, it really does flutter on the way down, and I think it helps call the fish in. It's not loud like a rattle trap or something like that, but it can be a little bit much if the fish aren't, super fired up. And so it's a balance I'm trying to strike here between, having enough flash and vibration and flutter to call fish in, call them out of the weeds, but not so much that they turn and bolt, because they were fussy on this day. But I was also, testing things, seeing what would work and what didn't work. A little while later, I got a good one on a Z-Viber, a Eurotackle Z-Viber. That's another good bait that I've done well with on bass, and it's not too intrusive like a rattle trap. It does have a little bit of sound to it, but it's a small bait, a single hook on the tail, and you can put bait on that single hook, which I usually do. And I've done well with bass and bigger perch on that in the past. So I'm just trying different things right now and seeing what works and what doesn't. I wanted to show a quick clip of this stuff. You can see that the weeds are kind of dead and dying on top. There's still a fair amount of green, but not as much green as before. There's plenty of bugs, plenty for the fish to eat, but I didn't have as much luck with this stuff as I did with that thicker green weed. It seemed like there was more fish where there was more weeds and the weeds looked healthier. And that could be an oxygen thing. It could be a shelter thing. The water also seemed a little bit clearer where there was green weeds. I checked a few of these spots when the weeds were looking a little bit, I don't know, what do you call them, half dead? They weren't all dead, but they definitely weren't as green as before. And I didn't see as much. All right, we're at a different hole, and there's a little bit more green. There's still a little bit of yellow, but I'd say more green overall. Right away, I have a bass coming in to check out my spoon there. He's coming up. I'm trying to lift him, and he turned away. Came right back. He's still interested, but maybe not super fired up. I'm trying to lift him. Ah, I almost had him. A lot of times, whatever I'm fishing, the game plan is usually to try to get the fish to come up. And if you can get them chasing, get them to come up and chase, you have better odds. It's not 100%, but generally I find if I can get them up and chasing, I'm much more likely to get them to finally commit and eat versus just dangling it right in their face. And if you think about it, just in nature, the little minnows and little panfish fry that they're after, if they come up to one of those little fish, they're expecting them to move away. They don't just sit there and wait to be eaten. So that's sort of what I'm trying to mimic. I'm trying to look like the spoon is getting away from the fish and not just sitting there waiting to be eaten. Now, on some days, it just doesn't matter. They'll just come in hard and fast and eat it. On this day, they weren't super fired up, and so I'm trying to kind of tease them into eating. I'm trying to lift them. I'm trying to get them to come up and commit. And sometimes I could get them to go, and sometimes I couldn't. All right, it's a little bit later on now. I've switched to the Z Viber. It has kind of like a baby panfish profile, and there's a small bass that came in. But what happens next is, I don't know if they're competitive or what, but a bigger bass started sliding in towards that Z Viber. And I was hoping for that. The smaller bass, they might be spooked by the more aggressive nature of the Z Viber. You don't have to remember all these lures. I'll list it in the video description. But the little bass and perch seemed a little bit, shy of a bigger bait like this. It's really not a big bait at all. They were just fussy today. But a bigger bass comes in any minute now. Come on, bass. There he is. And that's what I was hoping for. Something with a little bit more meat to him. And he turned away. I do end up catching him eventually, but I think just his swimming around, he pushed the camera out of the way. I'm trying to get him to come back. I'm being a little bit more aggressive with the pulls and kind of dancing that Z Viber up and down. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. When they're close, I tend to be, that was the little guy again. When they're close, I tend to be less aggressive. More shakes and pauses. When I don't see anything on camera, I'm usually trying to call them in. And it's almost like a turkey call or something. And it works sometimes. There's another fish on the left. He turned away. They're interested. There he is. That's a bigger fish. For whatever reason, the camera started swinging. I don't know if there was another fish or something bumped the camera, or just their swimming down there made the camera swing out of position. I'm not really sure exactly why, but I did get him to commit eventually, just shaking that Z Viber in his face and pausing, and you can tell the camera's shaking, and that's because he's bumped it on the way up. But I was happy to finally get that fish. Alright, I've had a good afternoon on the lake. It's time to slog my way back through the slush. There was enough slush that my sled started filling up with water. When I got back to the boat ramp, I had to hoist the whole thing up and drain it before I could put it away. So it was really sloppy out there, and again, the reason this was even a possibility was because I had good rubber boots. And it seems like a few times a year I run into this situation where there's, for whatever reason, there's slush on top of the ice, and it's not frozen. It's semi-frozen slush, and it's just miserable to fish in without good boots. So that was really the star of today, was good boots. And if you don't have good boots, I'd recommend picking up a pair before you run into slush, because it's just miserable fishing in slush without good boots. Alright, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you all for watching. I'll list everything in the video description, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again. See ya!